World War II explained. World War II did not begin because of one treaty, one dictator, or one sudden attack. Its roots lay in the unstable world left by World War I. The Treaty of Versailles redrew borders, imposed military restrictions on Germany, and became a powerful symbol of humiliation inside German politics. But another war was not inevitable. During the 1920s, diplomacy and economic recovery produced a fragile calm. Then the Great Depression struck. Banks failed, trade collapsed, unemployment exploded, and democratic governments looked powerless. Extremist movements promised order, national revival, and simple enemies. In Germany, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party used that crisis to destroy democracy and create a racist dictatorship built for expansion. The crisis was global. Imperial Japan seized Manchuria in 1931, then launched a full-scale war in China in 1937. Fascist Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935. Nazi Germany rebuilt its armed forces, remilitarized the Ryen land, annexed Austria, and demanded the Sudetenland land from Czechoslovakia. Britain and France chose appeasement at Munich in 1938. Their leaders feared another industrial slaughter, doubted their military readiness, and hoped limited concessions might satisfy Hitler. Instead, Germany occupied the rest of the Czech lands in March 1939. That revealed the problem clearly. Hitler was not simply revising one border. He was dismantling the European order, one gamble at a time. The final gamble came in Poland. On August 23, 1939, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact. A secret protocol divided parts of Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. On September 1st, Germany invaded Poland from the west. German forces combined aircraft, armor, artillery, and mobile communications to break through and disrupt Polish defenses. Britain and France declared war on Germany on September 3rd. On September 17th, the Soviet Union invaded Poland from the east. Warsaw surrendered later that month, and the two invading powers divided the country. World War II in Europe had begun. In Asia, however, China had already been fighting Japan for more than 2 years. For several months, little happened on the Western Front. Then Germany moved. Denmark and Norway were attacked in April 1940. In May, German forces invaded the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. The decisive thrust came through the Ardennes, terrain the Allies had not expected to carry the main armored attack. German units crossed the Meuse, reached the Channel, and cut off Allied armies in the north. More than 300,000 British and Allied troops were evacuated from Dunkirk, but they left much of their heavy equipment behind. France signed an armistice in June. Germany now controlled or dominated much of continental Europe, while Italy entered the war on Germany's side. The speed of the collapse made the Axis appear unstoppable. Britain remained in the war. Before Germany could invade across the Channel, it needed air superiority. During the Battle of Britain, the Royal Air Force used radar, an integrated command system, ground observers, and fighter aircraft to resist the German air campaign. Germany then intensified bombing of British cities in the Blitz, but Britain did not surrender. At sea, German U-boats tried to sever the Atlantic supply routes, keeping Britain alive. Farther south, British and Commonwealth forces fought Italy and Germany across North Africa. The Mediterranean, the Suez Canal, and access to Middle Eastern oil gave that theater strategic importance. The war was already larger than the familiar map of France and Britain suggests. On June 22, 1941, Hitler broke his pact with Stalin and invaded the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa opened an immense front from the Baltic to the Black Sea. German armies advanced hundreds of kilometers, captured huge numbers of Soviet troops, and surrounded major cities. The invasion was also ideological and racial. German forces, SS units, police, and collaborators murdered civilians and prisoners on a vast scale behind the front. Yet the Soviet state did not collapse. Industry was moved east. New armies were raised. German supply lines stretched across poor roads and enormous distances. Soviet resistance, autumn mud, logistical failure, and winter helped stop the drive before Moscow. The war Germany expected to finish quickly had become a gigantic struggle of attrition. At the same time, Japan faced an escalating confrontation with the United States and European colonial powers over its war in China and expansion in Southeast Asia. American restrictions threatened Japan's access to oil. Japanese leaders chose war, hoping a rapid offensive would seize resources and create a defensive perimeter before the United States could mobilize. On December 7, 1941, carrier aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor. Japan also struck across the Philippines, Malaya, Hong Kong, and other targets. The United States declared war on Japan. Germany and Italy then declared war on the United States. By the end of that week, the conflicts in Europe, North Africa, China, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific had fused into a single global war. Behind the battle lines, occupation transformed civilian life. Governments requisitioned food and labor. Cities were bombed. Millions were displaced. Resistance movements gathered intelligence, sabotaged infrastructure, hid fugitives, and fought occupation, while reprisals could destroy entire communities. At the center of Nazi policy was genocide. Nazi Germany and its allies and collaborators systematically persecuted and murdered 6 million European Jews. Mass shootings expanded after the invasion of the Soviet Union. Deportation trains carried victims to ghettos, concentration camps, and killing centers. Roma, disabled people, Soviet prisoners of war, Poles, political opponents, gay men, and other targeted groups also suffered persecution and mass death. The Holocaust was not separate from the war. German conquest created the reach, conditions, and machinery that made the genocide possible. Victory depended on more than battlefield tactics. This was total war. The United States became an enormous production center for ships, aircraft, vehicles, ammunition, and food. The Soviet Union rebuilt factories beyond the reach of the German advance. Britain connected imperial and Commonwealth resources to the Atlantic Alliance. Women entered military services and industrial jobs in unprecedented numbers, while colonial troops and laborers served across every theater. Intelligence mattered too. Allied codebreakers exploited German and Japanese communications, although intelligence only became useful when commanders, aircraft, ships, and soldiers could act on it. Logistics was the hidden weapon of the war. A tank without fuel, a fighter without spare parts, or an army without food could not turn industrial power into victory. The Axis reached its widest expansion in 1942, but several campaigns changed the direction of the war. At Midway in June, American aircraft sank 4 Japanese fleet carriers, damaging the striking force that had attacked Pearl Harbor. In October and November, British-led forces defeated the Axis at El Alamein, while American and British landings in Morocco and Algeria squeezed Axis forces out of North Africa. In the Soviet Union, Germany committed itself to Stalingrad and the Caucasus. Soviet forces encircled the German Sixth Army in November. It surrendered in February 1943. These victories did not end the war, and historians rightly debate the phrase turning point. Together, however, they showed that Axis expansion had been stopped across the Pacific, Mediterranean, and Eastern Front. In 1943, the Allies began pressing on every major front. German U-boat losses rose as improved radar, escort carriers, intelligence, and convoy tactics secured the Atlantic routes. The Western Allies invaded Sicily, helping bring down Mussolini's government. Italy surrendered, but German forces occupied much of the country and fought a long, difficult retreat north. On the Eastern Front, the Soviet victory at Kursk was followed by a sustained westward advance. In the Pacific, Allied forces used overlapping drives through New Guinea and across island chains. They did not attack every Japanese-held position. Many strongpoints were isolated and bypassed, while airfields and naval bases moved steadily closer to Japan. The strategic initiative now belonged to the Allies, but the hardest campaigns were still ahead. On June 6, 1944, the Western Allies opened the long-awaited front in northern France. Operation Overlord landed American, British, Canadian, and other Allied forces on 5 Normandy beaches, supported by airborne troops, warships, and aircraft. The operation succeeded because of years of preparation, control of the channel, industrial production, deception, and the ability to sustain armies across the sea. Fighting through the Normandy hedgerows was slow and costly. Then the German front broke. Paris was liberated in August. Germany launched one final major offensive in the west through the Ardennes that December, but it failed. At the same time, Soviet offensives destroyed German armies in the east and drove toward Poland, the Balkans, and Germany itself. The Axis was now being compressed from both directions. As Allied armies entered Germany, they liberated concentration camps and confronted evidence of mass murder. In the east, Soviet forces fought into Berlin. Hitler died by suicide on April 30th, 1945. German armed forces surrendered unconditionally in early May. Victory in Europe ended one part of the war, but it did not erase political tension inside the alliance. At Yalta and later Potsdam, the major Allied powers negotiated occupation zones, borders, reparations, and the shape of post-war Europe. Their common enemy was disappearing. The rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union was already beginning to define what came next. The Pacific War continued. American forces returned to the Philippines, captured islands including Iwo Jima and Okinawa, and brought Japan within range of sustained bombing. Submarines and aircraft strangled shipping, while conventional incendiary raids devastated Japanese cities. The United States had secretly developed atomic weapons through the Manhattan Project. On August 6th, an atomic bomb destroyed much of Hiroshima. On August 9th, another devastated Nagasaki. Between those attacks, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and invaded Japanese-held Manchuria. The exact weight of each factor in Japan's surrender remains debated. What is established is that Japan announced acceptance of surrender terms on August 15th and formally surrendered aboard the USS Missouri on September 2nd, 1945. World War II was the deadliest conflict in human history. Exact totals remain uncertain because records were destroyed, borders changed, and millions died through massacre, starvation, disease, forced labor, bombing, and displacement. Modern estimates commonly run into many tens of millions, with civilians forming the majority. Europe and large parts of Asia lay in ruins. Germany and Japan were occupied. War crimes trials attempted to establish individual responsibility for aggressive war and mass murder. The United Nations was created in 1945. The United States and Soviet Union emerged as rival superpowers, dividing much of Europe and beginning the Cold War. European empires were weakened, and decolonization accelerated across Asia and Africa. The atomic bomb introduced a new threat to humanity. The war ended in 1945, but its borders, institutions, alliances, memories, and unresolved arguments still shape the world today. World War II was not won by one country, one battle, or one weapon. It was a global conflict fought by vast coalitions, soldiers, workers, resistance movements, and civilians who endured occupation and mass violence. If you enjoyed our documentary, please like and subscribe to Annie Stories for more evidence-led history.